What's up, everyone on the internet? Thank you for making it for your party. I'm so excited to upload one for you guys because it's Mando-Monday, which means it's time for me to upload my review for episode 4 of The Mandalorian. So this episode takes place on somewhat of a peaceful planet where we are following a small village of farmers as they're being constantly attacked by a group of raiders. And at the same time, we're also following the Mando and little Baby Yoda as they're trying to find a place to lay low in this crazy galaxy. But while I enjoyed this episode, in comparison to episode 3, episode 4 of The Mandalorian feels like a small filler episode, but maybe it's because the episode 3 had so much more action in this one than in episode 4, and also maybe it's also the fact that episode 3 was the conclusion of a small trilogy of episodes that led the Mandalorian to Baby Yoda and their off-world adventures. But oddly enough, I actually enjoyed this episode. Maybe it's because of the fact that this one story stands on its own in comparison to the rest of the other episodes of The Mandalorian. Like for me personally, if I wanted to rewatch episode 3, I feel like I would have to rewatch episodes 1 and 2 just so that I can see the relationship of the Mando and Baby Yoda develop over those 3 episodes as it ramps up to the epic conclusion of episode 3. And if chapter 4 remains a self-contained story, as in chapter 5 takes place somewhere else and has no connection to chapter 4 whatsoever, I honestly got no problem with that because it's much easier for me to rewatch this episode in comparison to rewatching episode 3, where I have to rewatch episodes 1 and 2 just to get to the episode 3 conclusion. And while I still believe that episode 3 is the best episode so far in The Mandalorian, I still love watching small stories being told in a larger universe. But that does not mean that this episode does not have any flaws. And if I had any gripes with this episode, it's the fact that this episode seems awfully familiar to a Clone Wars Season 2 episode called Bounty Hunters, which is basically the same story we see in episode 4. Here's a brief summary of that Clone Wars episode. In that episode, we see a group of farmers on a distant planet hire some new muscle in hopes of helping them drive off invading forces that are threatening them, which is basically what we see in episode 4 of The Mandalorian. And even though I enjoyed it, I still wish that this week's episode had a little more originality to it, because in comparison to episodes 1 through 3, episode 4 feels like a retelling of an old story we've heard over and over again. And when you finish watching this episode, you realize that Bryce Dallas Howard directed this episode, and upon further review, you notice that she hasn't directed much lately. Which also reminds me of an article I read back in 2017 when Ron Howard was hired to direct Solo. And I remember in the article saying that he also made some negotiations with Disney saying that he'll direct Solo if they gave his daughter a job in directing an episode for The Mandalorian. So it makes me wonder that I guess Disney wanted, they didn't want to have Bryce to do a big, give her this big, budget episode. I guess they wanted to do a small one that felt more familiar and more safe route, seeing that she hasn't directed that much. But regardless of that, I still enjoyed this week's episode, and there's one moment in particular where I feared that the internet was going to explode and start riots in the streets. I mean, holy crap, forget the riots. I was actually more afraid that my mom and sister were going to turn the house inside out after watching this week's episode, but I digress. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. That was my overall review for episode 4 of The Mandalorian. If you like what you saw, click the subscribe button so you can get all these updates for this channel. I'll see you next time with a brand new video. Bye-bye.